Hello and welcome to the Wednesday night Hotline Live with Record Sport. My name is Daniel Caw. Tonight I am absolutely overjoyed to be joined by Record Sport's version of Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels. Keith Jackson and Scott McDermott. How's it going?
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, not
Big
bad.
night tonight, Daniel. Big night. The whole
Big
world.
night.
Well, the whole world is sitting, watching, and waiting for some kind of older guy, blonde guy, megalomaniac with a daft haircut to say something stupid. And I think Donald Trump's speaking later as well. So, yeah, big night all round.
Scott, how you doing?
Mad. I'm enjoying this weather, Daniel. I'm just thinking
It's magic, isn't it?
Just think when the first Hotline Live from a beer garden is going to take place.
What do you mean the first one? We did a whole summer with you two in a beer garden last year.
Well, I suppose. nice city centre beer garden.
Nah,
I think that's a great idea, Scott.
We should make that a permanent fixture, I think.
I'm sure we wouldn't get any hassle for the punters. The beer garden.
It's one thing doing it from a one-horse town and the foot of the Alps and Garmisch. What was it, Garmisch Partenkirchen? Aye, yeah. We weren't encountering much resistance in that wee town, Scotty, were we? It was all just candy floss and cotton wool.
Actually, on the weather, our pal Gianni Keith has written in saying, "Forget this show tonight, Keith. Get up here on the terrace, bottle of Pinot Blush on ice for him and the wife."
Oh, that sounds lovely, except I think you'll find it's a midweek school night and
she's not
I've got a big
night.
I've got a big night planned tonight. I'm going to go home, I'm going to put my shell suit on, I'm going to watch the Merseyside derby, and then I'm going to watch the last episode of This City Is Ours, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, is the best thing in telly.
Jacko, I've been meaning to text you for a few nights to ask if you were watching it. I wasn't sure.
Oh, it's magic.
How good is it? Brilliant.
Oh, it's magic.
Absolutely brilliant.
I've never seen it. It's good.
Oh, couldn't recommend it enough. Best thing in telly right now. Get it on the iPlayer. Fantastic. So I'm having a Scouse night tonight, basically.
Scouse-a-thon.
Aye,
excellent. Well, that is a big night in English football, obviously, but maybe we should talk about Scottish football to start with.
Well, we're talking about the BBC iPlayer.
That's true.
But yeah, let's do that.
Well, last night we talked, Keith, a lot about league reconstruction in the SPFL. Understand we've got a wee bit more info regarding that tonight.
Yeah, it's effectively dead. so that story didn't last too long. No, look, what's happened is I think today it has been set in stone. There will be a meeting of the competitions working group, the SPFL's competition working group, on the 29th of April. And obviously there's been, they've received a request. They've effectively been triggered into re-examining any chance of a reconstruction, which would then go an AGM if a proposal was agreed by the majority of clubs, rubber stamped at the AGM and into just 26, 27 start of that season. However, what I learned today was that the clubs that triggered this were a group of championship clubs. And clearly, there was talk of the main kind of agenda being reducing the top flight from 12 teams to 10. Well, the clubs that are pushing for this and that have actually triggered the sort of debate, they're looking for an expanded Premier League or Premiership. And on top of all that, just shortly before we came on the show, St Johnstone chairman Adam Webb has come out, and as we discussed last night, you need 11 Premiership clubs, to vote for. So if you wanted to go to a top 10, you need 11 out of the 12 to back that. Adam Webb has already come out and said St Johnstone will vote against it and would look for an increased top flight. So going entirely the opposite direction. He says it would be a stupid thing for Scottish football to do. We need to try and aim to be more like the English Premier League. And if we don't have 20 clubs that are ready to make a Premier League, then let's go to 14, 16, whatever, and edge your way there. So that's already the first one to stick his head above the parapet has said he'll be voting against. So you would need now the rest of the top flight, all 11 top flight clubs, to vote in favour of a 10 for it to get off the ground, and it ain't going to happen. So effectively, that one's dead. We will now go through a procedure of, you know, people arguing why it should be 14s, 16s, whatever. But I think, as we kind of said last night, Daniel, that requires a consensus. You've already seen on day one, the consensus isn't there for the 10. I doubt very much it's going to be there for the 14 or 16 either.
John writes in saying turkeys aren't going to vote for Christmas, Scott.
Exactly right.
Jacko, who would actually want a 10 then? I mean, is it purely the bigger clubs and purely just to get a bigger chunk of the cash being divvied up? I mean, is that the
I'm not
for it?
I'm not sure, Scott. I mean, I do know, obviously, there's a lot of talk of fixture congestion. And so the bigger clubs, and they haven't asked for this. It's maybe been their response to, you know, a move by championship clubs to try and increase it. They've maybe went the other way and said, no, well, let's have a look at decreasing it to a 10. It would mean instead of 38 games, 36 games. Reduces it by 2.
Aye.
I mean, there is an argument, Scott, and the argument that, you know, for people that would be pro going to a 10 would be, well, you're taking 12, you're getting rid of the 2 kind of lesser teams of the 12 to get to 10, increases the quality, they would argue. So instead of, you know, and certainly the argument against a 16 or whatever would be, you know, do people want Celtic versus Dunfermline, or do they want Celtic versus Hearts and Celtic versus Aberdeen and Celtic versus Hibs? And even though people might say, because I think there is an element now after 25 years of the top 12 and the split, there is maybe an argument out there that people want something fresh, something different. But I think they'd soon get bored of that as well.
Yeah.
So as I said, look, that's it. It's fallen at the first hurdle in terms of getting for a 10. We'll wait to see if what the discussions look like around 14 and 16. But as I said last night, there's too many pitfalls to that. There'll be too many objections. You're just not going to get consensus. If you think about it, the last time that we tried to do this and find a consensus was at Scottish football's biggest point of crisis. Yep. COVID had hit. The leagues had to be called before they were finalised. Teams were getting relegated without the fairness of and the equity of having a full campaign. And at that moment in time, it could not be more unfair. And so that you would have thought there would have been a willingness, and it might be possible to find a consensus to save the likes of your Dundee Uniteds and all the unfairness and Partick Thistles and all that stuff. It wasn't achievable then. There's no way it's achievable today. And as I said, the kind of the initial things seem to be pointing towards, you know, the top 10 and reducing it rather than expanding it. You know, it's 99.9% dead in the water. It's not something we're going to have to waste a great deal of time talking about. I'm sure we will, though. I'm sure we'll be talking about it for weeks. I'm sure that on April 29th, when the competitions working group gets together, there'll be a reason for everybody to have an argument about stuff. But at the end of the day, we're not going to find the consensus required, which is 11 out of 12 in the top flight, and then basically 75% from the Premiership and the Championship, and then 75% across all 4 divisions. That's not achievable, Manfred, because everybody comes to this argument with their own priorities and their own self-interest, and they can't see beyond it. So that's why people might want change, but I would. My guess right now is 90% not a chance, probably even higher than that, and it's certainly not going to be the top 10.
I totally agree with you. I mean, in terms of getting the consensus, you're probably right. It's a shame though, because you would like to see a proper conversation. Just obviously with this kind of making the headlines the last couple of days, people's been talking about it, and you see the different ideas. And I mean, when I kind of had a look at it today, I mean, I think the 14 would be good if they could get to that
14
point.
with a 6 and 8 split, Scott.
Yeah, I quite like that.
You don't feel that's horribly? I mean, if the complaint is about the top 12 in its current form, is that it's a bit manipulated, it's a bit, difficult to understand the split, and how team in 7th can finish with more points than the team in 6th, and
I don't. Do we
And
get?
it's
Do we
that, I
get
think
that?
that's.
Do we get much of that now, though? I mean, I feel as if that was the case maybe at the start. I don't feel as if you get that many complaints. No, I think everybody pretty
So
much
why
understands.
change it then? What's the advantage in changing it to
No,
14 and
it's
an
just
even more complicated split?
I'm no dead against. I'm no dead for changing it. I just think if you were going to change it, as you say, if you did want to freshen it up, no, you obviously the big caveat here is you need to still have the 4 Old Firm games, not to get any sort of TV deal. No, you need the 4 Old Firm games. I just think the 14. Listen, it wouldn't be perfect. I don't think any system would be in Scottish football, but the 14, when I looked at the kind of pros and cons, the 8 and the 6, you still get the 4 derby games, potentially one more relegation place, potentially a playoff for a European place. I think it would bring something.
And what do you have? Do you have a top 8 or a top 6?
I think the one I looked at was a top 6 and then a bottom 8. Then you can have a kind of playoff in the middle for the last European spot. Then
Wouldn't fancy being clubs 7 and 8.
Getting into the bottom 8.
Yeah, with nothing to play for. And by the way, Scott, to make that split happen, I think it's 26 games. So you're deciding who's the top 6 after 26 games.
Right.
Rather than at least, as things stand just now, 33.
33 games.
I think it's fairer surely to do it over 33 games before you tell people, well, this is what you're fighting for the rest of the season.
Probably. I do think there'll be a bit of excitement about it though. The kind of new format. I think if there's a European playoff place, as I say, 3 relegations, so there's more jeopardy. Whether obviously smaller clubs would want that, probably not. But I just think, as I say, I'm not totally for change. I don't think there's that many issues with the way it is just now. But I think if you were going to change it, Adam Webb touched on it there. I think if you're keen on expanding the league, 14 is clearly the next step. And you see how that works, and then maybe further down the line, that might be 5, 6, 7 years down the line, you can look at it again, see if it's working. Do you bring it back, or do you even try and expand it again? I just think that I definitely think there's enough clubs, enough proper big clubs in the Championship to get another two in there. I think it'd bring a bit of variety, just a bit of freshness to it. But as I say, I've not got a major issue with the way
Scott, I've got to tell you, mate, that does sound very much like change for change's sake.
Well,
to me.
But that's what I'm. Clearly, somebody in there wants change.
The Championship clubs want change because they want a bigger Premier League because they want to increase their chances of playing in it.
Of course. And listen, you can understand that if you're a Partick Thistle or a Dunfermline or a Falkirk or whatever, then obviously you would want a better crack at it, because let's face it, Jacko, I mean, we're talking about the flaws in the current system. I mean, one of them is the playoffs, because it's so heavily weighted against Championship. I mean, it's not impossible.
It's really unfair. Aye.
Yeah, that's really that's demoralising for clubs, I think. Because you want that Championship's a decent league. I think for the last few years it's been pretty competitive. But if you're in it and you're thinking we've next to no chance of getting up here, then I think that has to be tweaked in some way. As I say, I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but I think that could be tweaked to make it a bit better.
Let me hit you guys with some comments on this before we move on. Sijad writes in saying, always thought Scotland had massive potential to be the best outside the top 5 Euro leagues. Ease off some of the rules to make it more attractive to interesting buyers like the 49ers. There's at least 6 decent stadiums and can build more, because fan attendance to population ratio is one of the highest in Europe, so definitely a football mad country. The infrastructure is there, literally next door to the EPL, so it can attract tourist visitors if there are more high profile players in the SPL. But like death and taxes, there are always numpties in charge at the SFA. This one as well from...
You can't blame the SFA for this one. This is entirely an SPFL matter.
Aye. Scotland the Brave says, have to say, guys, I prefer the split and enjoy it. It was made for the best 6 teams to go ahead and could be a potential swing the title. However, Celtic dominance has beat that regardless. He says, I know that if Rangers had a 5-point lead come the split, there's still a great chance Celtic win the league, as Celtic can take care of the rest better. keep the split. Rebel says split the difference, make it 13 teams. And Marzuno points out what you were saying, Scott, the SPFL clubs would have to vote for less Old Firm visits and an expanded league. That's another huge financial hit.
Do you know, I think without this split, no, I mean, as much as we all probably laughed at it at the start, and as Keith says, there's problems with teams with more points, and there's obviously this anomaly where clubs maybe get 3 away games against a certain team. So it's not perfect, but do you know, I think without it, now that we've had it so long, it would be pretty boring. I mean, it does. I feel as if it does prompt a lot of debate, a lot of when you go to games, interviewing managers. I mean, it is a discussion. At this point of the season, I definitely
Scott,
think it's something to it.
I've come round to it, but it's probably taken 25 years.
Is that long?
I really didn't like it at first because you like to compare yourself. You like to look at the major leagues and kid on that we should be up there, swinging punches against the bigger leagues, the bigger nations. And I didn't like the idea that we were going into some sort of the kind of phrase was Mickey Mouse at the time, wasn't it? What we're doing, we're splitting.
I know, you're right.
But you know what? I've got used to it. And I'm looking at the options and I'm thinking, I'm not sure any of these options is more attractive than what we've got at the minute. And I think that's probably the way that the vast majority of clubs are going to look at it when push comes to shove. Everybody, as I said, goes in with their own vested interests. I can well imagine why there's a group of championship clubs right now saying expand. Of course there are. But is it going to make our product better than what it is? I'm not sure that it is. We'll see once the competitions working group has its meeting and these, all these proposals are put forward. I just don't think at the end of that meeting anybody's going to be walking out doing the Neville Chamberlain with a bit of paper saying, yeah, peace in our time. It's not going to happen.
As you say, Keith, I'm sure we will revisit it between now and when did you say, April 29th?
Yes.
I'm sure we will again. Elsewhere though, Dr. Dan Plumley, a sports finance lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University. I saw comments from him earlier on today saying he's stunned at the rapid progress that the Rangers takeover is taking. Now, Keith, I think Rangers fans, would probably want it to go a bit quicker because time, as we've said, is marching on.
I didn't know where you were going with this, Professor Dan Plumley.
I like to reference my research,
Okay. Well, yeah, but I think, to be perfectly honest with you, when we first broke the news that it was in advanced stages, I probably expected it to be finalised, wrapped up, and concluded before now. I'm not suggesting for a second that there's a problem or that that they're trying to overcome anything. I think it is just going at its own pace. I think there's so many legal things that need to be looked at, examined, cross-checked, double cross-checked. I still think it will need its own course to be concluded this month. But I also think, Dan, as I think you're hinting at there is actually a touch of urgency about it. Now, I really think it has to get concluded sooner rather than later. And as we discussed the other night, if you're Andrew Kavanagh, the 49ers, and you're looking ahead to next season, if you're not in a position to start laying down your plans for what next season looks like, if you're not able to do that by the beginning of, I would say by the middle of April at the latest, you've got a problem. Because in an ideal world, what you'd have is your manager in place that you're going with. You would trust his judgment, and you would already be beginning the process, and it has to start now, of going to players that, I don't know, for example, a Bayrami. Is he here for the long haul? A Robin Proper. What's the future hold for him? Do you want to? I would be looking, if I was in there, I'd be looking to sit these guys down and say, guys, it's really unlikely that you're going to get much game time here next season. Get on to your advisors, see what you can get. Give them enough time, give them enough, and be honest with them. I think honesty always helps in these situations. I think these players, if they were given a kind of running start going into the summer transfer market, they might be able to find something that suits them, something that attracts them, something that they'd be happy to move on to. I think if you leave it too much later than that, then all these guys that you would probably think don't have much of a future there, they'll all come back. They'll all be there for the start of pre-season training.
Good
the
contract.
guys that get sent out on loan previously, they'll all be back. So you're looking at a bloated squad of players that you probably think aren't good enough to move the club forward. Is that what you want to be? Do you want to be offering the fans that have been so excited about this buyout, do you want to offer them up the exact same menu at the start of next season as the one that they can't stand the taste of this season? That's what I'm just saying. I think there's a bit of urgency required now in terms of sorting out what's to happen with the current squad and also looking to the targets for next season. You'll see, there was a story today about a player, Georgian internationalist, that I think it was Sporting Lisbon said that Celtic were interested. They've sort of advanced the signing, even though it's out with the terms of the window. They've announced it early because there was competition. Porto have been signing players. These nations that compete against our sort of clubs for a certain bracket of players, they're all busy. They're all doing deals. There are players that will come out of contract at the end of this season. They're already in negotiations with clubs, free agents. There are other players that will come into this summer with 1 year left, and there's the possibility to get them at decent prices. All these things are happening across Europe at clubs, but Rangers are sort of stuck in a state of limbo. And I come back to it, and the more I think about it, the more I've convinced myself that Rangers' new owners, prospective new owners, have got 99 problems, and right now Barry Ferguson ain't one of them. So for that reason alone, I'd be thinking, do you know what? The smart move here, put him on a 12-month rolling contract. You know, you're not going to go and say, right, here's a 5-year deal. Put him on a 12-month rolling contract. Accept that he's doing a better job than was previously being done by the previous manager, and just say, look, we've got a ton of things to sort out. Why don't you take this on and let's see where we are 12 months down the line? Because I think if they don't have someone in the building making preparations for next season could look really similar to this season. Mm-hmm. And the Americans might come into this thinking, well, you know, we'll get a bit of time here. The fans will show us a bit of patience. That, you know, that they're really happy, they're really excited. That is the case right now. You wait 4 weeks into the start of next season, if the same players are out there turning in the same performances, getting the same results, and Celtic are strolling off into the distance, you know, after the first Old Firm derby of next season, you wait and see how patient the Rangers fans are about that.
Aye.
And I think they're misreading the situation. I think they're misreading the situation if they think anything other than that. So, yeah, I understand. First things first, they've got to complete this deal. But the longer this goes on, I think the more urgency there needs to be in terms of planning for what comes next. Because if they go in with a standing start when it's too late, they're going to get nowhere. They're going to have a difficult first season in Scotland, and you would have thought, with all the fanfare that's around this takeover, they would want to hit the ground running with trumpets blaring, wouldn't they?
See the stuff you're talking about there, Keith. How difficult do you think it is for them to do a lot of that stuff before the takeover's complete? And could a Greta Steinson, for instance, who is obviously close to the new investors, could be a potential new sporting director at Rangers? I'm just kind of throwing that out there. How possible is it that even before the I's have been dotted and the T's have been crossed, could guys like that be working away in the background doing that kind of thing that you're talking about before it's actually concluded? Or do you think that's possible?
It could be, yeah. I would have thought if in order to get yourself into that position, though, you obviously need to be having discussions with somebody. I would have thought that if that was the case, if they were getting their ducks in a row, that they'd want to sit down with the current coaching staff in there, even just to get their opinion.
Yeah.
On what they're seeing day in, day out in the training pitch, what their assessment is of the character of the players, all that sort of stuff. As far as I'm aware, I don't think that conversation has been taking place.
Right.
So I think you could have a whole... listen, it's entirely feasible, Scott, that they've already picked the guy that they see as the next long-term manager, and they're speaking to him and they're having conversations about what his recruitment might look like. And if that's the case, then maybe it's not too late, but all I'm saying is I'm seeing deals getting done now. Transfers are getting made. Players are declaring their futures. Other players are looking for what the next stage is, and I think there's a few of the players in that dressing room that should be doing that. But who's there to tell them that? I don't think anybody's went in there and said to them, guys, you might be surplus next season, so it might be advisable now to speak to your agent and see what's going to be available. I don't think any of these conversations are taking place, and that would be a concern. I know that, priority number one is getting the takeover completed, and I think Rangers fans will be absolutely thrilled by that. I'm not sure how thrilled they're going to be if this current squad returns for action at the start of next season. I think they'll be expecting something more exciting than that. And all I'm saying is, if you're going to make kind of serious changes to how that squad looks and feels, you really should have been starting work on that some weeks ago, and you really can't wait too much longer than the middle of April. For me, I might be looking at it right now and think, I like the look of Barry Ferguson. I think this job suits him. I think he looks as if he's capable of driving this thing. He's getting something out of a squad that patently wasn't good enough in the first place. I'm coming around to it, thinking you might minimise your risk here by just giving a 12-month rolling contract and allow him to carry on with the football side of it, because they've got so much more work to do on the other side of the club right now. I'm wondering if that might be a solution to the issue, and it might allow Rangers to sort of get fast-tracked towards next season. Because if if this thing doesn't complete until the end of April, you've only got a couple of weeks then to the end of the season.
But as you say, even then, if they decide to do that with Barry Ferguson, they need to sit down with him, because he undoubtedly is going to want his own players in. I mean, I wouldn't think for a minute Barry Ferguson will be looking at this squad at the moment. Despite the last couple of results and despite beating Fenerbahce and Celtic, I don't think there's any chance he's looking at that squad thinking, they'll do for me next year. Not a chance. He will be looking at that squad, seeing clear deficiencies that we've been seeing for long enough, and thinking, not only thinking I want it changed, I'm convinced Barry Ferguson will actually have an idea of 2, 3, 4 players that he would actually want to target, with the specific character traits that he's looking for to be part of that squad. So you're right. I mean, if they do make that decision, they need to sit down with him quick, because he's going to have his own ideas about exactly who he wants in. Where Niels Coppen comes into that whole dynamic, I'm not sure, but there's certainly conversations that have to take place pretty soon.
I mean, they've been 2-0 down in 5 of the last 7 games, haven't they? I mean, that kind of going. I need to ask you this though, Keith, because we've got a lot of people writing in saying this 3 or 4, saying, is it true that if Leeds don't go up, it can't happen? John saying, do they not need to wait until Leeds know if they're getting promoted to the EPL or not? I've seen a lot of people saying this on social media today.
No, I don't believe that is the case. I think that there's only a potential problem because the EPL was about to change its rules over the summer in terms of dual joint or umbrella club ownership. The Premier League's obviously very relaxed about it anyway. The EPL is changing to be more relaxed, and in any case, the bigger issue, or the only real issue that they would encounter, I think, was if both clubs qualified for the same UEFA competition. UEFA are a little bit more tight on this stuff. But even then, you've seen agreements being made with Jim Ratcliffe, with Nice and Manchester United, with Union Saint-Gilloise and Brighton. They're finding ways around this, because I think there's an acceptance that this umbrella club model is the way forward, and it's grown and grown across Europe. So I don't anticipate that being a problem. I think what would be a problem, as Scott was sort of getting at there, is they need to fast track this. They need to get their skates on. Scott's saying he thinks that Barry. I think it's a granted small sample size, but Scott, I think you can see there are certain players now that are already dropping down the pecking order. That might have been first team players or regular starters under Clement that are finding it more difficult to get game time and will find it increasingly difficult to get game time under Barry Ferguson, that would suggest to me that these are the guys that you probably want to be having a conversation with in terms of this doesn't look as if it's the right fit for you. And also, we know Barry because we've been colleagues for a long time. He's a really thorough guy, and that'll probably surprise people. Probably surprised me at first when Barry first joined the Record. You get some columnists that are happy just to have their name on it. They ain't that bothered about what appears under their name. Barry Ferguson, from day one and constantly, week in, week after, still after more than a decade, goes through every line with fine-tooth comb, making sure that he's absolutely delighted with everything. And then and only then will he put his name to it. And it's actually a long process, but he does that because he's actually a bit of a perfectionist, and I see the same traits going into this. So what I mean by that and how that manifests in terms of football management, I don't think Barry Ferguson's the type of guy that would get a list off Niels Coppin and say, yeah, I'll take him, him and him. I think he's the sort of guy that would want to go and send his coaching staff to look at a player. Once they've come back and said they quite like him, I think he would want to go and look at the player. And then the third stage of that would be, I really believe he's the sort of guy that would want to sit down across a table from a guy before he signed him to judge his character and get a feel for what he's like. Now, that's very old school management. That's not data-driven or algorithm-led. That's kind of old school stuff. But my feeling is that Barry Ferguson would want to do that the old way, because ultimately, if he was making signings, he would take responsibility for the signings. I think that the modern system allows people to abdicate responsibility, say, oh, well, that wasn't me, it was the computer, or it was him over there that said that. And I think there needs to be more accountability, especially at Rangers, where they've had so many misses in the transfer market. You would want a more hands-on approach. But the point of saying all that is that if you're going to go through that process, it requires time. It does require a fair amount of effort and manpower hours to do all that. And the weeks are running out. The season's almost gone. How do you go and watch these guys when the games are running out? So I just think these are all things that need to get factored into the decision-making process over the next couple of weeks.
Scott and Berlin there saying, I'm sure they've made behind-the-door deals with future players. Watch this space. The thing I'd say to Scott, though, who's going to be making these deals? They've no appointed anyone yet. I mean, a lot on the table for Rangers to do this summer. Let me hit you with this comment though, guys, right? And don't shoot the messenger, right? And that goes for everyone watching at home. This is not my comment. Robert Livingston says, Chris Boyd said jokingly, sign Greg Taylor. Well, Chris, the reality is Kyogo is the one Rangers should go for, especially with the possibility of Hadji leaving for free. There was a fan outcry when they signed Mo Johnston in '89. Some refused to go, but it proved a good move when he won 2 league titles and scored a lot of goals. That image there is a terrifying one for Celtic fans. But Kyogo to Rangers? Surely not.
Wait a second, Daniel, right? How did you start this? You segued into this conversation by saying what?
I just said I'll hit you with this comment that Robert said.
No. You said don't blame me, don't blame the messenger. That goes for me. I have nothing to do with this. How long did you spend doing up that image of Kyogo in a Rangers shirt? Nothing to do with you.
Hey, listen. Anyway, what do you think of the comment, guys?
Scott.
Oh, I don't know. Kyogo to Rangers.
We had Big Ange to Rangers as well last night, did we not? Or 2 nights ago?
Something like that.
Kyogo would be brilliant for Rangers. He'd certainly. Look at that. He'd certainly.
Look, I didn't want to. I thought I'd do them both kits, you know.
Is that him bought one of these shirts for Turkey?
It looks like it. He'd give him something I've not got, Daniel, in terms of pace and pressing.
Aye.
He's be a great signing. Get him in.
Patsy says, bring the wee man home and go to Rangers. Never. Robert Gibson says, Kyogo wouldn't sign for Rangers. He loves to score against them too much.
I think the Celtic fans could just about stomach Greg Taylor going to Rangers. Whether they could stomach Kyogo going to Ibrox, I'm not so sure.
With Big Ange as well. It seems what an introduction the Americans have already got planned. Try
and get Matt O'Reilly on loan as well. Just go the whole hog. Why not? See, actually, Keith, going back to that comment just very quickly, he mentions the Mo Johnson deal in 1989 all the way back 36 years ago. Am I right in saying that was your kind of big break in journalism, wasn't it? That was a mad story.
It was.
When that unfolded in front of you, that must have been wild.
Yeah, I was 16-year-old, so yeah, a little bit. Listen, do you know what that was? Be lucky, be in the right place at the right time. That seems to have happened to me frequently throughout the years. So yeah, I was on work experience at the time for another newspaper, which we shan't name, and working basically during my school holidays. And yep, heard this, realised I heard it probably back at 5 on a Friday night. I'd just come home from work, or maybe even later than that, and I thought, how bad would I be at this game if this story's true and I haven't at least phoned it in? So I thought I better phone it in. I phoned it in on the Saturday. The Sunday, the people that were working for the Sunday paper or the Sunday edition of that paper were in, but I spoke to somebody that also worked for the Monday paper, and I left it at that. Knew nothing more about it. Went to get the subway over to Kinnan Park on the Monday morning. As I'm going down the escalator, I just looked up and I saw the billboard, Mojo joins Jers. And I have to tell you, the adrenaline rush out of that. And that's, that's why we're still here 36 years later, I guess.
Aye. To do that,
but yeah, quite a story.
It's pretty
I don't know about adrenaline rush. I think my backside would have collapsed if I'd have seen that.
Very good point. Aye. Most people worry in their work experience about getting the tea right.
Exactly.
Breaking world exclusives and that.
Oh, it's not a bad start. It's been downhill ever since.
Rebel asked, was Mo Johnson better at Rangers than he was at Celtic, Keith?
I think so. I think he was a better player by the time he went to Rangers, to be fair, Rebel. I think he was more rounded. I think his time in France, he seemed to up his... In terms of, he was always a great penalty box striker when he was at Celtic. I think his all-round game became better. I think he really improved in France. And when he came back to Rangers, I think he was a better version of the Maurice Johnson that the Celtic fans knew and loved.
Aye.
Although that does seem like a very long time ago.
Aye. And Marzuno there saying Mo Johnson, that's a Kennedy moment for any Celtic fan. Any Celtic fan of that era, I can imagine it definitely was.
Oh, I mean, it was mega. It was mega.
Aye.
The thing about that, Daniel, just, and maybe like younger people might not realise, I mean, it wasn't just Mo Johnson signing for Rangers after being a Celtic player. I mean, the thing that just sticks in my mind, it was Mo Johnson being pictured at Celtic Park going back to Celtic. I mean,
it's funny you say that, Scott, because John writes in saying I was at Mo's first Celtic Rangers game at Parkhead. He never came near the jungle. I bet he didn't.
It was incredible. The pictures with Billy McNeil and the scarf and all that come back to Celtic. I mean, for them, the next day, literally, or the next couple of days to sign for Rangers, I mean, it was just...
It felt like that. It felt like that, Scott. But I'm sure sometimes your memory may plays tricks a little bit. I'm sure that Mo Johnson turned up at Celtic Park before Celtic played Rangers in the Scottish Cup final. So that's round about May. And I'm sure that they said he's signing. He'll be a Celtic player for the start of next season. Right. So I think that was round about the May time, and it wasn't until July that Maurice Johnson ends up being paraded at Ibrox with Graham Souness.
So sorry, I know I'm really getting off topic here, but what was it that held up Celtic in the end? They didn't pay the fee to on, or what was it? To actually get the signing over the line?
Just Souness came in and convinced them.
Just hijacked it.
Aye.
Yeah, but it's basically good old-fashioned hijacking.
Did Souness not walk into the Rangers dressing room after the 89 Scottish Cup final? I think Celtic won 1-0. Rangers players were devastated, obviously, and Souness's last words were, "No, don't worry, boys. We'll have the last laugh." And,
I heard that.
That's what happened that summer.
Scotland the Braves says Kenny Miller certainly wasn't a better version we got to Celtic. I actually thought Kenny Miller was pretty good for Celtic. But there you go. Other Celtic news, Kasper Schmeichel, Keith, is out for 5 to 6 weeks, according to Brendan Rodgers. I mean, look, Celtic, we've said they've got one hand on a domestic treble, but that's still not very good news for Celtic.
Listen, it's not. It's obviously not good news. but it's not as bad as it could have been. You know, there was a worry that Kasper Schmeichel, it might be slightly worse than that. He might even be struggling to get back in time for Champions League qualifiers for the start of next season. But this gives him a fighting chance of being ready for the Scottish Cup final, the end of the season. So yeah, it's obviously not good news, but I think it could have been worse. I think that Brendan Rodgers might have been fearing that it might be worse than that. So yeah, you listen, injuries happen. Kasper Schmeichel at his age, there's always the concern that the body might take longer to heal. That probably will be the case by a couple of weeks or so. But if the worst case scenario is that he's back and available for selection before the end of this season, I think Celtic will be perfectly happy with it.
Marzuno's on good form tonight, Scott. He says, plus 40 goal difference to Rangers. We could have Susan Boyle going, it wouldn't make a dent. I mean, I'm not sure I'd go as far as Susan Boyle. I get his point, but Celtic will want all their best players fit, won't they?
Listen, I think I said on here a couple of weeks ago, or when the Schmeichel injury happened, it's more the Scottish Cup, isn't it? I mean, they could have a Scottish Cup final, against Hearts or Aberdeen, and you'd want your number one keeper playing. I mean, Sinisalo looked decent. I was at the game on Saturday, looked absolutely fine. As you'd expect, no adept with the ball at his feet. In terms of Celtic playing out, didn't have too much to do with it. Made one big save at the start of the game, where Hearts could have went in front. So, no, they've clearly got a good young keeper there. But I think the key point is, as Jackal said, and he mentioned that when Schmeichel get injury, it's the long-term effects that it might have, even though he's going to be back, say, 6-7 weeks. It's just shoulder injury. For a guy at his age, you wouldn't want to think it was going to cause him a problem, going forward. Hopefully it doesn't. But when you get to that stage in your career, well, you're a keeper and it's a shoulder injury. I mean, it might be problematic. I mean, Celtic would be hoping it isn't, obviously, but that would be the only concern. In terms of this season, I don't think it'll be too much of an issue. It's more beyond that you would maybe worry slightly.
Actually, just finally on Celtic, Keith, there was news coming out of London earlier on today that Kieran Tierney's set to play a big part against Real Madrid for Arsenal. Jerry writes in saying Real Madrid in the European Cup quarterfinals. KT should use it as a training game to stay fit for the summer. That's all well and good, but see if you're Brendan Rodgers and Celtic fans, you'd be watching that through spread fingers, wouldn't you? I mean, with his injury record.
Well, if you're very much a glass half full type of person, I guess you probably would be.
Like I clearly am.
Sort of more optimistic about us would be saying, let's see how good Kieran Tierney still is. Let's see his quality against some of the best wide players that you can find anywhere in the European game.
Best team
and do you know what, as well? I'd go further than that. Kieran Tierney, I've always said, yes, he might, be as reliable as a Morris Minor, but he's a Rolls Royce, a football player when he's fit. And I'd take a Pepsi challenge for Kieran Tierney against anybody when he's playing at left back up against a pacey right winger. I've very, very rarely, no matter who he's been up against, have I seen him absolutely torn to shreds. It doesn't happen.
Oh, I agree. I think when he's fully fit, he's world class.
Yeah, definitely. So you know what? I think it's one, rather than watch it from behind the couch or behind the gap in your fingers, I think sit, enjoy it, look at what you're just about to get back, because we talked about Maurice Johnson being a better player when he went back to Scottish football after a spell in France. Kieran Tierney's only going to be a better version of the player that the Celtic fans fell in love with first time around.
Aye. Still only 27.
Tierney to Rangers.
Aye. singing the blues rights and Tierney to Rangers. And I think with that input, guys, that brings us to the end of Wednesday night's Hotline Live with Record Sport before we jump the shark any further. Thanks so much for all the comments and we really appreciate it. We'll be back to do it all again at 6 p.m. tomorrow night. We hope you can join us then. Scott, Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Cheers,
Daniel.
Thanks very much and hope you can join us tomorrow. Cheers.